Talia and Anna, welcome to Dad Edge. Good to see you guys.
Hi, thanks for having us.
You bet. I'm
Nice to
excited
meet you.
to. I'm excited to meet you too. I'm excited to do this podcast. You and I, we the three of us were chatting before I hit record, and I was telling you guys just last night that my 9-year-old and I were putting together Obi-Wan Kenobi's starship cruiser. So we were putting that together. We're putting the Legos together, and he was like, "Let's watch a movie." I was like, "Let's do Legos." He's like, "Okay." And then, 5 minutes into Lego building, he doesn't even think about movies or TV. So, which was fun. We had a blast. So, but I'd love for you guys, just each of you, just introduce yourself and your experience, and why why play is so important to the development of our kids, and even how it bonds the relationship with the parents.
Yeah, so I'll go first. I am a parent myself, so I have two boys, ages almost 9 and almost 6. I, like you, Larry, have so many memories and experiences with the boys. We Lego often. I'm looking over here to my left. There's a base that we have created, a custom base, a Star Wars base with all the little mini figures. So sometimes my older one likes to sort of bust out of the projects that he does and do something on his own. And it's just the setup, right? The playing with kids and getting off the screens and just engaging with them, to me, has been one of my most favorite parts of parenthood, getting to know who my children are. And I take that into my professional life. I'm a clinical social worker. So I see kids and families all day, every day in session, dealing with lots of similar challenges that I have in parenthood. That's just a common human experience, right? We're all going through it. I sometimes say, like, we're all in the same soup. And so it's a really cool and privileged role to be somebody's therapist and be able to talk them and walk them through some challenges that I myself have faced in parenthood. And so I'm excited to talk about play today and how we bond with our kids through play, how we teach them and prepare them for life through play. Play is it's so much more than we give it credit for, actually, in terms of preparing our children for life and for their future. So I'm really excited to chat about that and see if we can educate some of your audience members about exactly what they can be doing to maybe amplify their playtime with their kids.
I think that's one.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
um,
Sorry.
uh, I wanna piggyback on what Talia just said, that play is not always getting enough credit. And I think that's exactly why the Genius of Play was started. So I lead the Genius of Play initiative at the Toy Association, and we started about 8 years ago, really just remind parents about the importance of play and educate them about all the different benefits that kids get out of playing. And then, of course, provide resources, like obviously there's Legos, but there's so much stuff that you can do with your kids. So play is a big part of my personal and professional life. I had a very playful childhood. I had a lot of cousins who were roughly the same age as I was, my sister. So a lot of it was social and making connections, playing with other kids, also playing outside, kind of like in any weather. Right. So definitely a lot of memories that go back. And with the Genius of Play, I guess 8 years ago, when we were starting that initiative, we saw a slightly different picture, right? So a lot of us adults, we were remembering our playful childhoods and running around freely and playing with other kids. And what we saw was happening is, like, a lot of kids are very scheduled, they're busy, they have a lot of structured activities. So they kind of go from school to sports or music or different extracurricular activities that they have. And even when play happens, a lot of time it is guided by an adult, or it happens within a play date. So really it's fine, but you need to balance it with sort of like unstructured playtime and let kids lead and let them use their imaginations and let them play with a variety of different things, a variety of toys. Let them figure out what they want to do, not always just follow a structured activity suggested by an adult. So a lot of why the Genius of Play was started, really to balance, I think, kind of like pretty structured, busy lives that we have, and also devices. And I know we're going to probably talk about that, just the growing use of different media, digital media, social media. And again, nothing wrong with that, can be very educational for kids. But what science and research tell us is that it needs to be balanced with that traditional sort of like screen-free playtime, because what kids can learn from a screen is different from what they can learn without a screen and playing in sort of like those traditional ways.
Yeah, I think yeah, if we look at what I think parents are up against right now, um, and I'm just talking to the parents, I'm not even talking about the kids. And you guys tell me your experience. I mean, this is obviously your wheelhouse. It's the parents are up against, well, if I give my kid a screen, then I know that they'll be entertained and I can get X, Y, and Z done. And maybe they're watching some educational things or whatever else, right? So that's the justification behind it. Um, the other challenge that I think that we're facing is maybe it's not our kids that are on screens, but their friends that are on screens. And, they get attuned to being on a screen. And after they're done with a screen, they're like, I don't know what to do with myself. Like, I don't even, it's almost like the switch for imagination has been turned off in some way. And I don't know the psychology behind all that. I just see what I see and notice what I notice. But the other thing is that you mentioned in there, and I hadn't even thought about it for quite some time, which is how highly structured and busy our kids are. So like, it's like, and we do it here too, but only like once a week. But I look at my, like a day in the life of my kids on a Tuesday and a Wednesday when they're in school. And I'm talking about my little guys, my 9 and 7-year-old. They go to school all day long. I pick them up at 4. On Tuesdays, we immediately drive to soccer practice. And then we drive home after that, and then they eat dinner, and then there's very little free time before they have to like kind of get ready for bed and the next day and all that other stuff. And then Wednesday, kind of the same deal, pick them up from school. We drive straight to PSR, where they then are in public school religion classes, right? And then they're doing that. And I'm sitting here and I had this conversation with my wife not too long ago. I'm like, these Tuesdays and Wednesdays for our kids, like that's a lot, like to throw at them. That's so structured and so regimented. Like what time do they have to go out and just be, kind of like crazy 7 and 9-year-olds, right? So we've really tried to intertwine in more uh, structure free type of play times, which is actually we've seen to just be really beneficial just for their well-being and outlet of energy and all that other good stuff. But just from a psychological standpoint, can you talk to us just a little bit more about the impact of like, I even look at sports these days, like a 9-year-old that has like off-season baseball, right? And like they're playing baseball year round. Things like that. They're just like, when I was a kid, we did it once a week, right? It was only in
Yeah.
season and then we were done. But nobody was like trying to go out for the MLB or anything like that, down the road. But what what's the impact of all that?
So, I mean, the balance is really key. And I'm smiling, Larry, because you and your wife are actually in a like doing a good job. Some of the families that we work with have their children scheduled from when they get out of school until they go to bed, like 5 or 6 days a week. So we're talking about really overscheduled. And there's articles online called The Overscheduled Child that you can read about that kind of speak to some of the challenges with that. Because if everything a child does is structured and led by an adult who facilitates all of the introductions, and this is Casey, and this is John, and this is Abby, and you do all of that very, very structured, unfortunately, children don't learn how to cross those bridges on their own. And so when we talk about unstructured time, like hanging out at a playground, for instance, where there's no parent or adult that's facilitating, you just have a bunch of kids kind of freely playing. And maybe you run into somebody on the slide and you end up introducing yourself, or you have to take turns because there's a lot of kids who want to go down the slide right at the same moment that you want to go down. And kids have to navigate in real time some of those social dilemmas, right? Of maybe seeing a stranger at the park and introducing yourself and turning an acquaintance into a friend potentially, but in an unstructured setting. So to me, the unstructured part, the psychological development that happens when children have unstructured time is huge. All the emotional intelligence skills, empathy, social skills, motivation, self-regulation, mood management, self-awareness, all of these things happen in unstructured time. And it's not to say that they don't also happen when you have kids who are structured in sports and whatnot, but a balance is key. A balance is key.
Mm. Yeah, I didn't even really think about that, being like a 7-year-old, and you're on a playground and you have to learn very quickly, like the social dynamics of waiting your turn, or like, I'm not going to push this kid off the slide, or, things like
Or
that.
maybe you do push the kid off the slide, though. Let's talk about the reality of this. Maybe you do push a kid off the slide because you're frustrated and you want it to go down and he was trying to get there first. There's going to be what I call natural consequences, right? Where that kid may get up and do something back or say something back, or a mom runs over. Oh my gosh, are you okay? And that child has to navigate and persist through that experience. And to me, that's the beauty of unstructured play. Stuff like that is going to go down. It's not preventing those, that's the goal. It's just giving your child the opportunity to navigate through and have the experience. So next time he's on the playground, he hopefully isn't going to push a kid. He's going to wait his turn because he had the experience from the last time that didn't go so well, right? Pushing a kid didn't work out so well for him. Maybe nobody else wanted to play with him that day. That's a natural consequence. That's great. It's okay if that stuff happens. That's a learning opportunity. That's a growth producing event, is how I consider that with parents, and not to shy away from these growth producing events, but to lean into them and look at them through that lens of growth and what your child can learn. What lesson is he taking from that experience that matters?
How do you encourage your kids to go free play on their own more? And what I mean by that is, so like, we kind of have this tradition with my little guys. They're 7 and 9. And anytime I take them to a playground, they always say, "Can the monster chase us?" That's me running around the playground, acting like a monster, and I'm chasing them down. Right. And that is the entire thing of our play. But there's a part of me that every time we do that, I'm like, but no other parents are really doing that. And, when I see it, like when I go to the playground, and I'm not trying to say like what I'm doing is great, but I'm sitting here thinking like, okay, I want to be involved and I want to play, but I also want you to go out there and play with other kids. And what I have found is that I think the skills for my boys personally, like it's hard for them to then go out because they're dependent on me to go play with them. But I don't know if that's really sustainable. And as they get older, right? So like I want to encourage them, like, hey, go play with other people, go play with other friends. And I know from a parent's perspective, it's like, it's so simple, right? But it's not. To them, it's like, it's probably like, you're asking me to do what? That sounds really overwhelming to me, probably in their world.
Yeah, sure. I mean, if they have to go introduce themselves to a stranger who's running around on the park, like that's intimidating.
Yeah.
That's an intimidating social experience. And sometimes I think parents, it's been so long maybe since we've been a kid on the playground that we forget how nerve-wracking that can be. So I have a couple of responses for you. I mean, the first one is that I don't know if you know, there's some research on the difference between how moms parent and how dads parent, and there's some really amazing and really critical and important things that dads do that moms typically don't do. Now, it's not based on gender necessarily. Moms can choose to play in these ways, absolutely, and we always encourage them to. But you running around, right, being the monster chasing your kids, that is like, that's a form of a little bit of like the roller coaster of emotion is where we see emotional regulation skills get developed. So you may be chasing them, it's very exciting, and then maybe you pull back and you pause for a moment, and then you go after them again, and the enthusiasm gets, goes up again. That rhythm of play that fathers typically engage their children in literally is the seedlings of learning how to manage our moods. And so like there is research on the importance of fathers, that the way that they play with their kid predicts how children manage their emotions later in life and how their relationships develop over the lifespan. So I actually think that if your kids at 7 and 9 still want to play with you and they're like, Dad, come on, come run around with us, that's amazing. It points to a great bond and attachment between you and your boys. And within that, you may be able to do a warm handoff or pass the baton to your sons to go then introduce themselves and continue the game with another kid. And this is where I think parents can facilitate, not rescue, but facilitate. Meaning maybe you pull the first stranger into the group and say, "Oh, hey, would you like to join us?" And you can bring in a kid and do a little role modeling. "Hi, I'm Larry. How are you? These are my two sons." And you can role model and show and demonstrate your kids how to cross that bridge, right? From playing on your own to inviting a stranger or a new playmate into the game. So I think a couple of amazing things that are happening between you and your sons, but also there's some really important role modeling that kids desperately need in order to learn how to do that on their own without your presence there.
100%. It's kind of funny. I smile when you were saying that, because what will usually happen is we get 2, 3, or 4 kids that will come up to us as I'm running around the playground with them, and they're like, "Chase me too." And I'm like, "I don't think your mom would appreciate a strange man just chasing their kid around." So I'd be like, I can't really do that, but and then we just kind of go off on our merry way. But I like that approach better. I really want to talk about the the beautiful indirect like lessons that kids get from play that quite frankly aren't on our radar as adults. You guys talk about emotional self-awareness is one of them, self-regulation, motivation, even empathy, which I think is really, really fascinating. Social skills I can definitely understand because I know that those are really your top 5, but I would love for you to just share how kids learn these things through play.
So I'll give you some examples, and I'm sure, I mean, these examples are classic and they're unfolding in households everywhere as we speak right now. Just the act of playing a board game, right? One person might win and another person might lose. What we see getting missed by some parents is that losing is an opportunity. And so we see some parents that are doing too much rescuing during play. And what we're coaching parents on is, let's not like prevent your child from having a meltdown by making them win every single time you play, because that's not really setting them up for success either. The world is not going to cater to their mood and make sure that they win so they're not upset. What we have to do is teach our kids how to lose, and how to lose graciously, how to cope with defeat, how to deal with frustration, disappointment, being excluded, being made fun of. Things like that are where we see like the skill set start to develop. And so when we're playing, there's a couple things that I do with my kids. Number one, I always plant the seed about chance, meaning when we're playing a game, sports, structured, or whatever, there's no way for me to know who's going to win and who's going to lose. And you can't know either, and you won't ever know. That's just a reality about life that we have to accept and integrate into and make it normal, make it, not a big deal that somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose. I think planting the seed at the outset, even before you start a game with a child, by educating them on what does a game of chance, literally, what does that mean? So I think when we plant that seed, we have children more readily accept when they've been defeated, right? And then they can be a good sportsman.
So being proactive with that.
Yeah.
That's really cool. And that's something so simple, but it's not really on your radar as you start to, it's funny. I think probably parents are more reactive when it comes to that. We were just out last night playing wiffle ball with the kids, and I'm coaching my 7-year-old's baseball team. So like, I always try to refer back like, hey, cause he has his first game this week. And I'm like, hey, when you get up to bat, like he was really pissed off. He struck out and he like threw the bat. I'm like, dude, you can't do that. Like, you're going to strike out. Like, and especially in a game, don't do that, so, but it didn't even occur to me to be like, hey, when you get up there, there's a chance you're going to hit it. There's also a chance you're going to strike out. There's also a chance you're going to walk. I'm not really sure what's going to happen, but depending on what happens, like, let's make sure we, like, I probably should give him some guidelines, right? I'd be like, hey, don't throw the bat at the pitcher, something like that.
I mean, let's talk about empathy in that moment. I was a
Yeah.
catcher growing up, right? I was a catcher when I was in high school. And so to me, that may be that there's an empathy opportunity here. When you throw the bat, you could, nab the catcher or the umpire. And it's just like, you're out of control, right? You're flinging this bat out of anger. Let's talk about alternative ways that you can express your anger. I hear you. I'd be frustrated that I struck out too. So validating, normalizing their emotional experience is critical, because what tends to happen as soon as you validate a child and you say to them, I hear you, I get where you're coming from, I've been there, I can relate to you, that's normal. As soon as you say that to a kid or anybody, honestly, most people respond back with, thank you for that. It's such a relief to hear somebody bear witness to what you're experiencing emotionally and get you in that moment. And so there's a way to sort of help open up your son and any child in that situation, open up the point of view, stretch out that perspective a little bit. Kids and a lot of people are so tunnel vision, but the second you can kind of break through that and expand their awareness of what else is going on in that moment, both for them as well as for those around them, maybe like the catcher and the umpire in this example, they really get it. These concepts are not complicated. They're actually really, really simple and so easy to teach kids. And then the next time he gets up at bat, you plant your little seed, your little reminder, get out there and have fun. Remember what the plan is. We'll come and chat maybe after you bat. You can develop a little like routine with him to help him be able to express those emotions. And I mean, quite literally express them up and out of his body so that they're not taking hold and holding him hostage, as emotions will if we don't know how to cope with them effectively.
100%.
I wanted to add about empathy because, yeah, that is so amazing. And obviously, Talia talked about how, well, you're playing with other people and you see their reactions, their feelings, and that helps you develop empathy. So play goes even beyond that. There was a really interesting study a couple of years ago, I think 2020, during the pandemic, it came out. So it looked at the kids who were playing with stuffed animals and dolls. So not even necessarily with other kids. You know how smaller kids, their stuffed animals are their best friends and they have names and stories behind them and they play with them. They imagine all sorts of things with them. And when they play in this way, it turns out that the regions that are active inside the brain, those are the same regions that are responsible for developing that empathy. So the researchers actually scanned the brains of the little kids as they were engaging in that play with stuffed animals and dolls. And those centers that were responsible for empathy, they would just like light up. They light up in a big way during this type of play. So in a way, it's almost like, yeah, you know, obviously when you're watching reactions and emotions of other people, but even the mere fact of playing, even if there is no other person involved, kids can develop and practice that sort of like the foundation of empathy. And obviously we're talking about kids who are much younger, but it's interesting that even before they get on that sports team, before they get on the playground or school and they start interacting with a lot of other kids, nature kind of like takes care of developing that foundational empathy. And the way that it happens is through play, through imaginative play in this case.
Interesting. Yeah, as you guys are talking through this, it sounds probably so much simpler than what we make it, or maybe even more simple than how we even think about it. And the other thing too is it safe to say that most parents don't even look at play with these type of benefits? They just look at play as play?
I think
would think that. Yeah, Sally, you agree? Yeah.
I agree. I don't, and this is the cool part of the initiative, and what we're trying to do is to really educate parents that playtime is there's so much more going on. There is so much more going on in play than just what's visible to the eye. And if we can help parents understand and be educated on some of those layers of emotional intelligence, what they can do is amplify the play experience to not just be laughter and bonding, which of course is a huge part of play and what, helps us enjoy our kids and make memories and whatnot. but we're talking about developing skills that are so critical for life and critical for resilience, which is the ability to get through tough times and come out a better version of yourself than before you went through that tough time. And to me, that's like one of my main focuses right now, especially with supporting kids and parents, because we've all gone through this pandemic. We all go through challenging experiences, big and small, every single day. So teaching our kids how to rebound from some of those challenges that they will face does start when they're playing, whether it's imaginative play or playing with a friend or losing a board game. That's where it starts. That's where it starts.
Can you talk to me a little bit about what do we lose when we're trying to just play? I put that in quotes, through a screen.
Oof, you mean like video games?
Yeah, so I think it's twofold, really. Let's talk about tablets and kids just kind of being babysat on tablets. And listen, we're guilty of it too from time to time. It's like, oh, we'll just, it's an educational thing, so it's okay. When in actuality, it probably isn't. And the other thing too about the video games, yeah, like I remember growing up. I mean, we had Atari and a Nintendo, and now, I've had other guests on the podcast that are video game experts, and like there's all kinds of, like, basically it's like, you guys know how Doritos were made, right? Have you ever heard this?
No.
Basically like, so I can't confirm what I'm about to say, but it's more like zoomed out, and like I heard this, right? They basically took a corn chip and they're like, do whatever you have to do to make these things taste so good that people basically like eat a bag. And then after they eat the bag, they go buy another bag, right? It's like that chip. It's like the Dorito. It tastes so good. It's like the MSG. It's all the things in it that just light your brain up like, oh my God, this
It's
tastes so good.
addictive.
It's addictive.
Yeah, it's the point of being
And
addiction.
and it's like they've kind of have done the same thing with video games now, to where they've made them so fascinating, so interactive, and they never end. Like I remember, like playing Atari Asteroids, and you can only blow up rocks for so long, and you just got to go do something else. You're like, I can't, I don't even care how many levels I get to. I can't blow up any more rocks. It's just boring. But like now it's like, it's so stimulating that it's hard to, I feel like once you've opened Pandora's box with allowing your kid free reign with video games, I think some video games are okay as long as there's really tight boundaries around them. But the psychological impact, I think it's kind of scary because we don't know what we don't know. Talia, you probably know way more than anybody of the psychological impact of way too many video games and what that does to a kid.
I mean, the effects are infinite, honestly. And you said it right there, which is boundaries. Right. And you even use the word guilt, right? That you're guilty of it too. I mean, my kids have tablets too. I hate to look at it through this guilt lens. The guilt comes with the inherent assumption that you've done something wrong, right? If there's boundaries and balance, and we're educating our children about what it is that they're doing on screens, and what role screens play in their life, and where the boundaries are set and why, to me, it's really integrating children into those conversations. And, there's plenty of resources out there. And I talk to people in the office in session about, writing up contracts, screen time contracts, agreements that 100% include the child's point of view. The child is a key collaborator in designing these agreements and these contracts. So it becomes an opportunity not only to educate about the balance of screen time and maybe some of the not so good effects of it, but we're also attending to our child's interests as well. And they may want to try something or experience something, and we can do that in bite-sized doses. Now, the video games you're talking about, right? These ones that just don't end, and the graphics are insane, and there's just like things blowing up and a lot happening on the screen. I look at too much screen time like that as a real problem for attention issues. As human beings, I read this research a couple of years ago, our attention span has dropped below that of a goldfish, which is, right, look at your face. That's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. So, and it was like goldfish are like 8 seconds or 9 seconds. And like we're under that at this point. And the scrolling and the constant like trying to feed our brain constant novelty, something new, which is why everybody on their phones, we're constantly refreshing our page to see if something new popped up on our social media. It does impact how our brains are laid out. And for young children whose brains are still developing and they're still very much under construction, for boys, sometimes until age 30 is when their prefrontal cortex completes development. So we have to be really careful, especially when our kids are young, about how much screen time they get, specifically because of how it interferes with how the brain gets laid out, and it contributes to attention problems. When your child goes to school and they don't have all of this novel stuff happening in the classroom like it does on the screen, they have a really hard time keeping up.
I mean, I think adults have a really hard time. I mean, you look at adults in a boardroom and they're just like, I mean, like it's funny. We have group coaching, with our guys, with men and husbands and fathers. And when I used to work a full-time, so everything we do is on Zoom. And then when I had a full-time job years ago, you'd be on these Zoom conference calls and you could see that people were doing other things, or they would just kind of like, just nonchalantly, like kind of like be like this, because I'm looking at my phone right now, or they would just kind of like be over here, over there. And it's almost like they couldn't completely engage in the meeting. They had to see what else was sparkly and shiny.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, lack of focus.
Right,
Mhm.
right. It's
And
a real
that's
skill to weed that out, weed that noise out. Go ahead,
right.
Anna, sorry.
Yeah, no, just wanted to say that, you touched upon focus, and a lot of like those very simple traditional toys, they have been proven to actually improve and grow a child's focus. Because even if it's something like building a tower with blocks or playing a game like Jenga, well, you really need to focus on what you're doing. Because if you do just one incorrect move, the entire tower tumbles right down and you just destroyed your work. Or if you, even if you're drawing something, you're putting together a puzzle, right, and you're trying to look for that one missing piece of the puzzle, you're trying to solve a problem through play. So all of that requires a lot of focus. And the researchers even say, that's why we kind of like need to provide kids with enough time to get into the flow as they play. Because a lot of those traditional play patterns, they do require time. So they cannot just happen. 8 seconds is not going to be enough for them to get the benefits out of that sort of like dedicated, slow moving playtime. But it is very beneficial. And if you think about that, obviously it depends on the profession, but if you're a scientist, if you're in any profession that requires deep thinking, not just multitasking and juggling a lot of different things, but focusing on the problem and really trying to find a solution, then that skill, the ability to concentrate, becomes absolutely critical.
Hmm. What do you, let's go back to boundaries a little bit. So what advice would you give parents who, what is the right boundary?
So listen, every child is different. Every household is different. Routines are different. I always encourage parents to like allow their children to educate them about who they are, what their preferences are, what their desires are, what their goals are, what they're drawn to, what they're passionate about. Because to me, the better we know our kids, the easier it is to communicate about boundaries and about screen time in general. I mean, I'll talk about what I do with my kids. My kids' iPads are password protected. They have no idea what they are. They can't use them unless they come to me or my husband. So that's like a very easy one. Just out the gate, they can't have access to them on their own. Second of all, we talk about what they're watching, right? I really encourage parents to sit and watch the shows or play the video games that your kids are interested in with them. Make sure we have a really good understanding of what they're engaging with and why. What is it that they like about this thing or this show or this video game? We have to know what they're drawn to and what motivates them to stay interested in it. That is huge, because if we don't understand, we often arrive at these situations with just our ideas in mind. And it's like, all right, just get off, right? We'll just it's all or nothing, right? And some parents will try and take what feels like the easier route and just say, okay, well, just get rid of this. That doesn't necessarily work either, because what we see is some damage to the relationship between parents and kids, and especially children who are more your kids' age, Larry, my kids' age. They're old enough to have opinions, to want to assert those opinions. And I think the more we can respect them by allowing them and inviting them into the conversation about boundaries, the more receptive they are to the boundaries that get set, right? If they contribute to writing the agreement, they're more likely to follow the agreement, which means less conflict.
You know, we have a parenting expert in our community. He runs one of our group coaching session call teams, and he always talks about this, the agreement, right? So therefore you can, as a parent, you can always refer to as, hey, this was our agreement. It's not, I told you so. And because I'm the parent, it's, this is what we agreed upon.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned that personally, I guess it was probably about 4 or 5 years ago. And it has just paid absolute dividends, because in order to have an agreement, you have to have buy-in, right? And if a kid buys into like, well, hey, I only get, so like my older ones, this is hilarious. Like it's funny, not funny, but so I have a 15 and a 17-year-old, and every kid their age and the kids that they hang out with have Snapchat, and they also are just like ridiculous with TikTok. Like they just watch TikTok like nobody's business. So our kids do not have Snapchat, and they only get an hour of screen time outside of text messaging per day. So they can use their apps, whether it's, they can listen to music anytime, but they can only watch something like TikTok or YouTube for an hour a day. That's it. And then it just shuts off. And then they have to actually they have to request access for more time if they ask for it. And usually the answer is no. But the thing that I think is kind of fascinating about that is that we agreed upon that. So like, hey, if they're like, hey, I want a phone. Like when they were younger, I'm like, okay, well, if you want a phone, then we have to make an agreement. And this is when they were like 13. I was like, the agreement is, you're not going to have Snapchat. It's not an app we're interested in having. And you're only going to get an hour of screen time outside of text messaging per day. Are you agreeable to that? Are you okay with that? And of course, I know like I'm probably pulling a manipulative lever there as well. But at the same time, I want them to buy into it, right? So like I want them to agree to it, be like, instead of me being more dictatorship, it's more of a bit of a democracy. But I could say, if they complain, they get upset or whatever, be like, well, this was the agreement. So we agreed upon. You said yes to it, right? So that was the agreement. And it's something that has really served, I know, our parenting style for a long time. Even something as simple as like, hey, I want to go out with so and so tonight. Be like, well, we can do that, but we have to agree first that your room gets cleaned. Are you in agreement with that? Like, yeah, I can do that. Okay, great. So then
Larry, you're holding them accountable though,
yeah, we
right?
do.
Like right? That's an accountability thing. And that's emotional intelligence too, right? That's understanding motivation, it's understanding your child well, to know what motivates them. And it's you teaching your child that agreements are serious, agreements matter. And when he asks to, have more time, and you uphold the agreement, you're also teaching him about who you are, right? Are his agreements with you serious or not? Am I going to be able to just ask my dad, okay, yeah, we got this agreement that we signed, but if I ask him, he tells me yes. So who gives a crap about the agreement? It becomes, it holds no power anymore. So like that piece of it, that there's so much emotional intelligence that just exists within that, inviting your child to make the agreement and then upholding the agreement for your child, right? That to me is like, that's your steady Eddie. That's stable. He knows his dad isn't going to be up all over the place. He knows what to expect from you.
I appreciate that. It's these little nuances that I guess we get to learn versus like falling on our face over and over again, which we've done tons of times as well. But I would love for you guys just to share with us what is the genius of play.
So the genius of play, I'll take that one, you know, and then Talia, you can continue. So the genius of play is a toy association initiative for parents and caregivers and educators. So basically, it's a website, thegeniusofplay.org, with tons of free resources, because we talked about the importance of play, but what we see parents are asking, well, what do I do? How do I play, right? Where do I start? What are the activities that are going to help kids learn all of those skills: emotional intelligence, imagination, creativity? So that's exactly what the Genius of Play is all about. We have literally hundreds of play-based activities, things that you can do with your kids. They can be sorted by age, even by preparation time. So if you need something that you can do quickly, you don't have a lot of time, we have activities for that. Or if you have a little bit more time, or you need to keep your child occupied for an extended period of time, we have activities for that as well. And we also partner with a lot of different experts. So I came to know Talia through the Genius of Play. She is one of our contributing experts. She writes for our Expert Advice, which is a column that we have on the geniusofplay.org. And we have professionals and experts from all kinds of different fields. So Talia is an expert in mental health and emotional dynamics. We also have occupational therapists who can talk to physical skills. We have special needs contributors who talk about play-based approaches that you can use with kids who have all sorts of special needs, whether it's autism or ADHD. So literally just a ton of stuff for parents and educators that they can tap to help make their life a little bit more playful, but also to help kids sort of like get all those benefits of play.
You know, just as you said that, I think one of the biggest gaps for parents is, where do I start? Even though we were a kid once before and we did play, you know, it's like you kind of forget if you haven't been in that mode for a while. And it's just like, you know, my kid is looking at me like, let's do something. And you're like, not really sure what to do or where to start or how to do it.
That's true. And also as a parent, and we already talked about that, you're dealing with so much, right? So like play is not always the first thing on your mind. It's you know, all the other stuff that you need to get done as a parent, and as you know, as if you work, you know, and you have other responsibilities. So we want to make it easy for parents. We want to sort of like take work out of play and just give them something that they can use right away. And with the emotional wellness playbook, that was exactly the same idea. So, you know, obviously we are seeing a lot more demand for a lot more attention and focus, I would say, on mental health, and just bigger concern on the part of us as a society for mental health, and not only among adults, but among kids as well. A year and a half ago, the American Academy of Pediatrics actually collaborated with two other child-focused organizations, the Association of Children's Hospitals and one other, and collaboratively they declared a national state of emergency on kids' mental health. So that was a year and a half ago. A lot of it has to do with the pandemic, but unfortunately, the pandemic is over. The mental health emergency does not seem to be over. And I know Talia is seeing it in her practice, the demand for mental health services amongst kids, teens, adolescents, that have grown so much. And earlier this year, CDC came out with a report amongst teen girls, especially loneliness, suicidal thoughts, tendencies like that have only been increasing, unfortunately. So the pandemic is over, but there is a lot that we need to do to help kids become more resilient, to help parents recognize the importance of emotional intelligence and focus on that and understand what is happening, and also understand what they can do, right? Not just recognize that there is a problem, but be part of a solution. So that's exactly what we wanted to do with the emotional wellness playbook, rather than just state that we have a problem and, you know, kids need help, but actually provide activities that would help kids develop the skills that will help them prepare for those challenges that are definitely going to happen as they grow up.
You know what I think is so cool about your website? Well, first of all, everything you just said, I'm not surprised by the mental health impact of the pandemic. I think it, if you really think about it, like from an adult perspective, it was really hard what we went through as adults. But I couldn't imagine being a kid. I couldn't imagine, being a first grader and trying to learn my lesson plans on Zoom and also try to somehow acclimate back to society. Like it's got to be so confusing for them. And I'm not just talking about just first graders, but just kids in general. So yeah, there's a real problem. And I think we're seeing the ripple effect of all that. But I also think to compound it and Talia, correct me if I'm wrong, but the story I'm telling myself is that, you know, we're in the middle of like this ripple effect that we felt from the pandemic, right? This sort of fallout of mental health, and add on top of it, kids don't know how to play because they either have a tablet or a video game or something else. Well, on top of it, now we're just giving them more tablet time instead of more play time to help with that mental health aspect. But the cool thing that I love about the geniusofplay.org from a parenting perspective, you've got this broken up to like, so you have a tab here that says play ideas and games, and then you could do it by age. So 0 to 3, 3 to 6, 6 to 9, 9 to 12, by benefit, which this one blows my mind. So I can pick some sort of play that's either cognitive around communication, creativity, emotional, physical, or social. And then even the prep time, like you were talking about, like I'm sitting there thinking as a parent, be like, okay, if I have to cook dinner and I have to do this and we have got this and this and this, I kind of want to know what I'm in for before I commit to it, because that way, like, I don't want to be like, okay, we have it all set up. We don't have any more time. So you've got it set up in 5 minutes or less, 6 minutes to 15 minutes, and then 16 to 30 minutes of prep time. But this is brilliant. And this is exactly what parents need. So good for you guys for creating this.
Thank you, Larry.
Yeah. So, and back to it. If a parent listening to this podcast right now, and they're like, man, this is exactly what I've been looking for. Where does a parent start? Do they start on the tabs that we were talking about, or where's the best place for them to start?
I would say Play Ideas and Games is a great place to start. Also, expert advice, because that's where you can get in touch with experts like Talia and many, many others. And get in touch, I don't mean necessarily to talk to them, but really browse through a lot of different articles. We have an amazing library. We have articles on emotional wellness, on literacy development, on conflict, talking to kids about difficult situations and difficult topics. We have articles about the importance of happiness and play as an RX, prescription for play, and what is happening in our brains when we are playing and how it affects stress and anxiety and how it helps with those types of negative feelings. So there is just a wealth of information on expert advice as well. So between those two, Play Ideas and Games and expert advice, it's like whether you're in the mood for more information, kind of like what we have been talking about now, research, facts, what is happening in kid's brain, how does play help build those skills, expert advice can definitely help answer those questions. Or if you're looking for practical idea, what do I do with my kid? I only have 5 minutes or I have half an hour that I need to fill, then Play Ideas and Games would be the place to start.
Awesome. Well, this has been so beneficial and so needed. We've got a generation of parents who are just, we're just gunning for ideas. We need them. And then we also have a generation of kids who, from a mental health perspective, from a social health perspective, all these amazing benefits that they get from play, like empathy and social skills, and even physical awareness skills, all these different things that you get through play, much needed. And thank you guys very much for that. But is there anything else that you want to share before we shove off today?
I mean, I would say one thing just to the parents out there, to give ourselves credit. Every parent goes into this experience wanting to do a great job. I've never met a parent that says, God, I hope I messed this up. I mean, parents are just some of the most motivated, committed, just down for the ideas. They're knowledge seekers. They want to do a great job. And I see them working so hard. And, you know, our next generation of kiddos coming up really need it. So it's a great match. And I hope parents are giving themselves credit and, you know, allowing people like us to put you in the fast lane for getting the ideas and getting the advice and, you know, understanding what's happening, some of the nuances and the psychology of what's happening during playtime, you know, allow us to support that process and help speed you up.
Awesome. Anna, anything from you?
Yeah, I was gonna say, since we're on the podcast, so your listeners like to listen to podcasts, we did a podcast for the Genius of Play as well, and it's a lot of fun. It's called Once Upon a Playtime, and what's different about this podcast that it is a storytelling podcast that you can listen with your kids. So it's not necessarily just for parents, but I think they would be perfect for your kids, for like your 9-year-old, your 7-year-old, and your older kids as well. What it does, we interviewed guests who are pretty well-known people. Like we had Alicia Silverstone on the podcast, we had Simon Sinek, and we asked them all about how they played as a child. So Simon Sinek is a huge Star Wars fan, just huge.
I knew I loved him.
And we learned a couple of things like that. But we asked them how they played and what their favorite toys were. And then we wanted to see, well, what did it do for them? How did it help shape who they are today? And we found some amazing connections. So between how people played as a child and their passions, their hobbies, their professions, careers. And to me, that is just fascinating. And I think a parent and a child can both listen to this podcast. Their understanding will be on different levels, right? So for a child, it will be more about like, oh, you know, they played Nathan Sawaya, for instance, famous Lego artist. He played with Legos when he was in a crib, pretty much, you know, like right from the moment he was born, he was playing with Legos. A child is going to pick up on things like that. While for a parent, I think there is also this deeper connection between how we played and how it shaped our entire life. So definitely encourage you to encourage your listeners to check it out. Summer is starting, so there will be a lot of road trips, a lot of time in the car. So that is a great way to listen to something with your kids. So Once Upon a Playtime is the name of the series, and you can also find it on our website. I think as far as the tabs go, there is a tab called Play Talk, and that's where the podcast lives on the website.
Yeah, I see it right here, actually. Well, guys, not to worry. We're going to have the link for the podcast, but so much more actually as well. We're going to have thegeniusofplay.org. So you guys will be able to see that website and all the amazing ideas. Trust me when I say go over there, check it out. It is amazing how they've got this literally engineered for parents who are just looking for resources and a way to help our kids play better and to get all these amazing benefits. Also, they've got a Genius of Play Facebook group as well. Their Instagram handle will have that in there as well. They have a YouTube channel. We'll have that in there as well. And then also, Talia, you've got your LinkedIn. I can put that in the show notes as well. That way, if any parent wants to reach out to you personally and maybe inquire about any therapy or counseling or anything that they might need extra, they can contact you. So guys, thank you so much for coming on. This was awesome and so needed. But this was a true blessing for me personally and for the audience as well. So thank you so much for coming on.
Appreciate your time. Thanks, Larry.
Oh, you bet. You bet. Gentlemen, head on over to thedadedge.com/Friday 111. How about that? Thedadedge.com/Friday 111. We'll have all the links that I mentioned in the show notes for you. And if you want to connect with Talia or Anna, you can do that as well. We'll have that in there. But truly appreciate both of you guys coming on today and sharing this message. It was awesome.
Cool. Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you, Larry.
You bet. Gentlemen, go out and live legendary. Take care.